Author Strategy Masterclass. So there's a reason I'm giving this now, and it's because I think strategy is actually more important than ever. And I have this kind of dramatic line to open up our talk, but I really believe it, which is when creating costs nothing, strategy is everything. I feel like every single day someone's talking about AI, and I don't want to talk about it at length. But what I do want to share is that regardless of your feelings on artificial intelligence, the technology is making it cheaper to produce almost anything. And books are one of those things, but videos are one of those things. Products are games, code, software. So when it becomes cheaper to produce these things, the word dramatic is nothing is dramatic. It's not, it doesn't cost nothing to produce these things, but it's much cheaper. Strategy becomes a lot more important. But strategy can also be a bit of a buzzword, right? It's like what is strategy? And I'm sharing this superpower from the author marketing decks, which you can actually download for free on authorsidekick.com. I haven't like officially hard launched that website yet at the time of recording, but if you go there up in the banner, you'll see a link and you can press that link and get the 50 superpowers for free. And if you haven't read it yet, the first card really is this book marketing system, which is me trying to help folks think through approaching learning the superpowers in a way that's more strategic, right? Thinking about these five core questions. Who is your story for? How will you share your story with those readers? Are those readers interested in your story? How will you find a lot more readers like them? And then how you turn your story into an empire. And, you know, as we'll see soon, I think that we can expand on these questions more. And I actually have 10 questions that I'll share with you in the end that are what I call your micro strategies, so that you're able to take the big picture where you want to go and break it down into like really the 10 questions that matter, which 10 I know isn't that simple, but it covers every single area of your author business. So I try to be as comprehensive as I could. So, like I said, when creating costs nothing, strategy is everything. This one card here is not going to form your foundation of your book marketing strategy. There's a little bit more to it than that, hence this workshop. And I think we have to start with what is strategy, right? And my definition of strategy, we all might have a different definition of strategy. And I shouldn't say my as if I came up with this. This is just my own definition cobbled together from a bunch of other different definitions and ways I've heard other people say it. And this is the language that resonates the most with me, which is that strategy is the set of questions and resulting decisions that guide our author business. And I think the ordering of this definition is important. Questions and resulting decisions, but the questions come first. And that's really the biggest thing we need to think about in our author strategy. We can spend a lot of time trying to think about what to do. What do we do? How do we do this? What should we do with this? Right? And sometimes we don't pause to take a step back and ask ourselves, are we even asking the right question to begin with? What assumptions are we making? I'll give an example. You know, you might be under the assumption that you need to get more readers, right? And that if you just marketed your books more, you would have a more profitable business. And that's a valid assumption to make. But then we have to think about what's undergirding that. Like, is that really true? I thought that for a long time. And I spent a lot of money on ads trying to get more readers. And I got more readers, but they didn't stick with me because my issue wasn't necessarily getting readers. My issue very quickly became the fact that they weren't sticking around to read more of my stories. That was a problem. My retention rate was low. The average read through rate of my stories was close to 30% on KU page reads, which is not that great. You really want to aim above 50%, really close to 70 to 80% is much better for book one to book two when we're talking about Kindle Unlimited. For actual book buying, anything above 50% is solid, right? I was below that. But instead of asking, I want to grow my income, right? That's what I think a lot of us want to do. But instead of asking the question of, okay, how do I really grow my income? What's really gonna influence this? What's really happening here? I instead was just like, well, how do I get more book sales? And then strategically backing into that. If I had asked a different question, I would have had a very different answer and things would have turned out differently. So that's one big thing you need to think about is, are you asking yourself the right questions? Luckily, I'm going to give you a lot of those questions and we're going to think through a lot of them today. So, some background on me and why I care about this word strategy is I actually worked as a strategist full time for the largest content creator in the world, Mr. Beast. And it was an amazing experience. I loved being on the strategy team for Mr. Beast. And we had three big goals when I was there. And the first was to determine the why and how of every key decision. So if there was a problem that came, we were supposed to be asking the question. There was a lot of different channel analyses that we would do on the channel, different viewer demographics that we were looking at, um, different hypotheses around different videos and format retention, all these like wild, really fun questions, right? But we'd have to come up with those questions because ultimately the goal was to grow the viewership, but we were trying to determine what actually needed to happen to do that and where's the actual health of the channel. It was a lot of fun. And the third goal, actually, which is another key piece of strategy, is not just the data and the numbers part of it, but it's building relationships with people. And that was, relationships with different platforms, relationships with different top creators, right? Um, whatever your goals are, wherever you want to go, wherever you want your strategy to lead you, not only do you need to ask the right questions, but you need to have the right people in your corner. That's pretty much always going to be true. So that was what I did with the Mr. Beast strategy team. And I left because I'm an entrepreneur. I had to start my own thing. I'm a founder. I had to get back to it. And I love the author community. And YouTube is slightly different than authors. Connected, but not quite the same thing. But there is something that I became very passionate about, which is that not every author can hire a strategy team. In fact, uh, there are a number of creators in the YouTube space that do hire strategists, um, and usually they're on a part-time basis. I know a few who work for creators full-time. It's a very rare role, a very valuable role for a creator. I think there's so much that a creator can get out of it, but there's, to my knowledge, no author in the world who has a what we'd call a true content strategist in-house. I think there's a few who are maybe strategy coaches, um, probably not in the way the YouTube ecosystem has it, which I think is actually something that should change. I think there should be a little bit more strategy help that authors get. But even then, the people who can do that part-time, I think, and the number of authors and creators who have part-time strategy help is minuscule. It's, under 1% of 1%. Maybe that's a little of an exaggeration, but it's not much. So, how can we bring great strategy to everyone? How can we help everyone think through what they need to do to grow their author business and make better decisions? So, this masterclass is a step in that. My upcoming Reader First book is another step in that. And I also have something else that I'll share with you in the end that's all about helping become your ultimate strategy sidekick. So, with all this said, this doesn't explain why I really care about strategy and why it really matters to me. And the thing is that I am a strategic thinker myself. I know so many of you shared where strategy is in your top five Clifton strengths if you've taken your top five or done all 25. For me, I've done all 25, and strategy or strategic is my number two strength, and futuristic is my number one. So strategic thinking is something that is a strong suit of mine. It's innate. It's something I love, actually. Like I so love it. But just because it's a strength of yours doesn't mean you're using that power in a way that's best for you. You got to use your powers wisely. I certainly didn't, um, at all. And I remember 4 or 5 years ago, I guess it was closer to five now, but I was really getting into now marketing my books. And I had made a series of I'd say false judgments about what it took to actually get my career going. I thought I needed a big backlist before I could really start marketing my books. So I wrote 9 books and hadn't even marketed myself. Um, then I decided I was going to rapid release these books, right? And then run ads to them. And that ultimately led to burnout. And not only was my strategy very similar to what a lot of people were doing, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, by the way, at all, my tactics were also remarkably similar to what everyone else, quote unquote, was doing. My Facebook ads looked the same, my headlines looked the same, my descriptions looked the same. I was just running the same playbook everyone else was, hoping for something different. As I'll share briefly and just a little bit, that's not a great strategy. Running the same playbook as someone else in our industry and expecting the same results is a poor bet. And I'll share why shortly. But there's something even more foundational here. Beyond just the innovation, beyond standing out, is that I wasn't playing to like what I'm good at, what I enjoy. And for me, I shouldn't have even been writing for the market I was writing for, candidly. Like what I should have been doing with my science fiction books was writing for an audience of like technologists, founders, people who are creating weird, wacky new technology, probably living in San Francisco, and running a model much more similar to what Elliot Pepper, who I love his books, he's an amazing author. He doesn't focus on the ads. He doesn't care about how much books he writes and rapid releasing. He writes one or two books in a year, if that. And then when he publishes them, his readership, it happens to be a lot of them, and he's writing science fiction, mind you. A lot of them are executives or founders of interesting technology companies, and then they bring him in to consult with them. And that would, for me, that would have been like the model. And candidly is, it's definitely like where I see myself in my future as a science fiction author, without a doubt. Um, I wish I took a step back to learn more about the broader world of entrepreneurship, to learn more about what other folks were doing, and to really take a step and realize what would be best for me, right? I did not do that. But I mean, I changed, right? Since then, I've set out to create my own path in the world. And I could go on for hours about like my own business strategy, what I've been doing for the last 4 years since I've kind of jumped into from being a creator to now helping creators, and whether it's building software or communities and education like this. I've taken a very different approach than a lot of folks do for very specific reasons. But that's not this webinar. What this is, though, is to share with you that if you've been in that place where you're doing something, you're doing the right things, you have the right strategy, but it still feels broken, that that's actually normal. Like you're feeling the very normal thing. And I felt that too. That doesn't mean you're not a great strategic thinker. That doesn't mean that you you can't find the strategy that works for you. That just means that we've got to go back to square one. We've got to start to rethink things. So before I get to actually these strategy steps, and I promise it's the next slide, we're going to get into it. I have one last thing, which is probably not for the folks here, because so many folks who are here live all seem to be top five strategic, which is awesome. I love that. And you all are the best. But for folks who maybe skipped out on this call because they realized it was about strategy and they're like, that word and me do not mix. If you're watching this recording, I want to let you know that y'all can mix. It's okay. That you can be a great strategist, and that you ought to be if you want to have a great career as an author. So common things I hear is, especially when folks are talking to me, because I tend to be very futuristic, is, well, I'm not a futurist, or I'm not strategic, or what if my strategy is wrong? And all I have to say is you can learn to be a great strategist. And hopefully by the end of this, you'll be one step closer to becoming a great strategist for you. Not a great strategist for someone else, not a great strategist in the industry, not a great strategist for Y or Z person, great strategist for you. And I share this picture of the game Risk because if anyone's played Risk or Catan, there's a bunch of different strategy games that are popular. I personally love Risk. It's why I share it. It's something I played from like a very young age. And if you've ever played a strategy board game, first of all, then you are a strategist and capable of strategic thinking. And if you haven't played a strategy board game, here's your call out. There's also more than just strategy board games. There's strategy video games. There's tons of different strategy games you can play. But I think once you start to learn that strategic thinking is actually fun, truly fun, you can then start to apply those same skills to your author business. And I want to start to give you those thinking here, but it's also just a call out that if you haven't played Risk, Risk is a great game. So I'm always down if you're at an author conference and you want to play Risk with me. We can set up a little Risk group. That actually be super fun. So now let's start getting into like my overarching strategy view, philosophy, and how I like to think about strategy, especially in the specific industry we're in. I'm going to get more into that on the next slide, but what you need to know now is that the really core question you have to ask yourself is what game are you playing? You're probably not playing Risk. You're probably not playing Settlers of Catan, none of that. I mean, you can, but you're probably not doing that in your author career. If you find a way to turn Risk into a book and make a living playing Risk is like a game for your author career, like I would love to do that. Sounds like you took my dream job, but regardless, you need to ask yourself what game are you playing? Are what are you trying to win, right? Is it the number one bestseller slot on Amazon? Is it the movie deal? Is it the huge mega tome of a series that people talk about forever? Is it the loyal readership that's going to follow you as you genre hop 10 times? Is it, the steady income, which, mind you, is close to impossible in this career to be steady by the metrics of a 9 to 5 job, but steady-ish? Or are you looking for, to hit it big and get out and just, be like Hugh Howey on a yacht, basically, which I love Hugh Howey, by the way. If you don't know him, I'm not jealous of anyone. I love his lifestyle. Like I love what he's done, but like, man, you sometimes look at his Instagram feed and you're like, I wish I could be like with him right now and not where I am. You'll get it if you follow him on Instagram. He's the best. He, if you don't know, wrote Wool, which is now Silo on Apple TV. So he's done quite well, well deservedly. And he's an indie author. Started off just like all of us. So the big thing about strategy, the big thing that we sometimes miss, outside of like what game are you playing, is I think it's very simple. I'll give you an example beyond what's just on this slide. But I firmly believe that a great strategy is taking one bet on something over a long period of time and having every decision you make align with that North Star. That's essentially all it needs to be. And a lot of folks that we've seen successful in the author industry have had different strategies. But I'll tell you the strategy for Jimmy, and this is a public strategy, and Jimmy's Mr. Beast. And the strategy of Mr. Beast has been very simple. Get as many views as possible. That's it. That's it. Specifically on YouTube. There was no other anything else. It was he could build the whole business doing that, which is kind of wild if you think about it. Like here he was at like 15 saying, I don't care about profit. Profit was not on this table at all. I don't care about making money any other way. Now it's turned into this bigger empire. But still to this day, the core of it, and what it was for over a decade, was get as many views as possible. And when most creators were at 10 million views a video, thinking, yeah, no, I did it. This is it. I got my I got my money. I'm out. He was like, are you kidding me? This could be so much bigger. And they're all going, Jimmy, you're crazy. 10 million views of videos. Like we've done it. And he just kept pouring back in, doubling down, learning more. And now he's at 200 plus million views a video. All this to say that if you really bet long on something and play to win, not just for a specific outcome, but the winning of what it could be, right? If you really go long on something, it could be much bigger than you ever imagined. And there's there's a reason why something that simple worked that well, because that's all it was about. And sometimes you can be a mess and bad at everything else, but if you get one thing right and you take the one right bet, it could be huge. And here's the nice part. You don't have to have your bet work out to that scale to make a great living. If your bet works out to the scale of Mr. Beast, you will be a billionaire. Doesn't have to be that way, but it is that simple. You just need one thing to work and to really bet on that and really go all in on that. So here's a few examples of authors who've taken different approaches, right? Because your approach probably isn't endless YouTube views to make a career as an author, right? Probably not. If it is and you want to optimize for that, talk to me. I'm happy to help. Happy to help with all of this. But here's some things that we probably can all relate to a little bit more, which is going all in on a genre in its early days. You're going, this market, just this market that exists, I don't think a lot of people see it. And I'm gonna like carve out my name in it. I'm gonna go all in on this. Alain Kong's a good example of this. He calls himself the father of American lit RPG. Um, I'm saying he calls himself this because I've heard it be debated. It's like, who really is the father? I don't know if there's a single father, but it's great branding. Okay. He nailed the branding and he's a great guy from what I know. I've never met him personally, but I've heard good things. With that said, he runs this community and he started it with a bunch of other authors. It's a massive lit RPG Facebook group with tens of thousands of readers. he went all in on the genre. He went all in on the genre and it paid off because he has a series that still continues to sell really, really well and crushed it. Another one is like building fandom at conventions because you could go, I'm listing examples. You could come up with 30 different things you can go all in on, right? Like this is I could go on for hours about that. But Kevin J. Anderson, who's recently on the Beyond the Book podcast, talked about how for years he built fandom at conventions, and that's how he went all in. Which, by the way, if you listen to that podcast, you'll know that Kevin J. Anderson had multiple different strategies that he ran at different stages of his career. Like at first, it was like he realized that there was this novelization opportunity where you could take screen, like popular movies on the screen and turn them into novels. And he was able to do that. He was able to dive deep into then helping science fiction authors in the trad world move to indie, at least a lot of their backlist. I mean, he's a brilliant case study in how your North Star can change over time, which I'm going to get to that more in a second. But going even further, you have AP Bestwick, which if y'all don't know him, he's the best. He crushed on TikTok, right? Went all in there, and he does more than just TikTok now. But also, that's really what he's known for. That's really where he did really well, and he does TikTok Shop too. He crushes it there. Then there's Jack Edwards, right, who does book reviews on YouTube and is now coming out with his own book, and it's gonna sell absurdly well. But he just does book reviews on YouTube. That's what he built for years, and now he has an audience of 3 million people ready for his book. Crazy. Another example, Alana Albertson. I can't tell too much details because these are still going to be publicly announced at some point. But she went all in. This is public. She went all in trying to get her books turned into a movie deal. And to do that, she knew she had to go trad. Meanwhile, she was crushing it as an indie author. She was making really good money as an indie author and said, screw this, I'm going all in. Went to trad and said, okay, we're going to do this. She wrote a specific book that she knew would grab the attention of Hollywood and that could be sold as, to directors, to studios. And lo and behold, she got it. The success and how much funding is behind this movie is unbelievably major. And it took her time, took her years, but it paid off. So obviously now I think with these stories, the question of how do you figure out what to focus on? Like what becomes your North Star? Or I like to say for us here, since this is not a public call, the language I like to use is secret master plan because I think that's what your strategy goes back to. Like Alana's secret master plan was not getting her book trad published. It was building the future of basically movies for Latinos in America. And guess what? She's doing it. And it's going to be incredible. And she did that. Her action step was, okay, I've got to get into the trad world. That's how she thought was the way to do it. To mind you, there's other ways to create movies than go to trad, but that's what she did. And she did it, right? Jack Edwards, BookTube, we get the examples. So there's 4 steps, technically 3 steps of strategy. Starts with step 0, then goes step 1, step 2, step 3. This is all about helping you figure out what to focus on and what to do. Because again, strategy is the questions we ask, and then it's the decisions we make, right? The actions we take. And the first step, excuse me, the 0th step, but it's the first one, is the most important. It's why I call it step 0, which is stay alive. This is the one we forget the most about, and it's the most important by an incredibly wide margin. The short story is you need time, you need money, and energy reserves to make it as an author. This seems obvious, but what doesn't seem obvious is this next point. We are in a non-normal distribution industry, or as many say, a power law industry, an industry entirely driven by a power law. What does that mean? This means that very few people make most of the money. This is true in a lot of different industries. It's true in tech startups, which I have a lot of familiar with. It's true in movies. It's true in YouTube. It's true in music. It's true in books. It's true in almost everything that intersects with culture. There's larger sociological reasons for that. I'm not going to nerd out today on that, but if you want me to talk about that separately, maybe I write an article about it, whatever. What you need to know now is that if you're like a 50th percentile author, which is really, really good, right? I'm not trying to say like there's an objective way to be better than half the authors in the world, but let's just say there was. Just like let's say there's an objective way to be better than half the lawyers in the world. It's tough to say, but no one really knows if you're a 50th percentile lawyer, but let's just pretend, right? We know roughly you are middle of the road lawyer, you're the middle of the road author. All right, well, middle of the road lawyer They probably have a really good job in terms of an income. They probably don't have a problem getting a job. If they want to start their own firm, they maybe could. I don't know. I know a little bit about law. I don't know all the interstices of the industry. But if you're to look at the unemployment rate for people who have a law degree, I'd imagine that unemployment rate is a lot lower than authors who've written 10 books. That's probably fair to say. That is okay. It's just part of how culture works. It's part of human nature, actually. Changing the economics of the industry is less of a capitalism problem, although there is certainly things that should be better about this industry, which I talk about ad nauseum almost all the time. But one thing that I've thought long and deep about and that I don't think is really possible to change unless we change human nature is the power law. It's the one thing I won't bet against. So if we come to this understanding that the power law is here, the power law is here to stay, and it's been here for a very, very long time, this means that it's actually very hard to get into that sense of making a living as an author. It takes a long time and a lot of effort and potentially a degree of luck as well, which how you get lucky is increasing your surface area for luck. Part of that surface area is time and effort, right? So part of it's playing the game for a long time. And the biggest thing, when you are in a normal industry, right? You get your education for a couple of years, you do your training for a couple of years, you intern for whatever, you do your thing for a couple of years, you grind for a couple of years, and then you get the opportunity, right? It's a couple of years though, and then we're good. I think a lot of us think that same thing about authorship. We know it's not going to happen overnight, right? Most of us do, and it's important, but most of us don't think, oh, well, 10 years from now is when it's going to happen. Now, it's funny hearing this from me because I'm a very ambitious person and I encourage a lot of you to be ambitious and to move forward and to dream big and go for it. But I also want you to plan as if it's not going to happen for 10 years. Because for most of you, that's going to be the case. That's just a fact. And knowing this fact, knowing that it takes a while, knowing that there's big ups and downs, our default has to be to stay alive. And that's not just from a cash perspective, although that is certainly from a cash perspective. If you make a lot of money when you're as an author, don't spend like you're going to continue making that amount of money. It's a very bad idea. Likewise, you want to make sure you don't dump too much money into your business at the beginning, because if you can't afford to do that over a 10-year time period, that's not sustainable. That's how I want you thinking about this. Can you afford to do that for 10 years? And it's not just money, it's your energy, right? It's your time. Are you sacrificing your relationships? Like, it's one thing to be like to your partner or to your friends, hey, I'm busy writing this book right now. I can't hang out. But what if you did that for 10 years straight? What would happen then? Would you lose all your relationships? And the sad part is I've seen so many authors do this, myself included, for 2 or 3 years on end. And then you do end up in that position where I was burned out because you thought, oh, I have to make it now. This is my opportunity. And it's like, yes, but no. Your opportunity is to stay in the game, to keep going. We're in a non-normal distribution industry, but that means that you can have a really awesome outcome if you stay in the game, keep at it. That's how you increase your chances. There's no guarantees in any industry, in anything, but certainly not in this one with a non-normal distribution. But the one guarantee is if you don't stay alive, it's over. And I've seen so many authors go for a couple years, stop the journey, and then take years before they come back. And you've just lost all that time now. You weren't in it for 10 years. You were only in it for 2 years. You've been an author for 7 years, but you were actually writing for two of them. I had this problem myself, actually. Like every day would eat me alive when I was at my day job, where I literally felt like every day I was pouring my energy into that. I was taking away from what I wanted to bet on, which was me and my 10-year goal. And then every single day I was doing that, I was actually working against myself. So I had to do everything I could to figure out how I could smartly quit and have savings and no pressure so it could be sustainable, which I could do a whole other talk on like profit first and whatever, all of finance for authors. That could be a whole interesting talk. That's not for the strategy conversation, but it's very connected, right? You have to be able to stay alive. That's the most important thing to me. If there's one takeaway, is that if one huge takeaway, I'll give you three more takeaways at the end of the call, but the one biggest takeaway is if your strategy is not sustainable, then you should stop. Your strategy isn't working. That's your sign. If you can't do your strategy for 10 years, don't do it. Stop. just stop, do something else. There's no right or wrong strategy. You'll figure out a better one. But I could tell you it's a wrong strategy if you're going to burn out, if you're going to burn your bank account or burn your relationships. That's it. And we don't talk about that enough because sometimes we're so focused on what strategy is going to make us successful in a 2 or 3 year time period. And if we go back a slide, I think the biggest thing in strategy is to take one bet on something foundational over a long period. And I'm encouraging you to think about a decade. That's intimidating. I know it is, but it's really how I want you to think about it. So let's say we did this because I don't want to harp on this the whole call. It's something I'm very passionate about. But let's say you're staying sustainable and promise me that. If you promise me to stay sustainable, then we can move on to our first actual step in planning out our strategy, which is identifying your growth bottleneck. This is super, super key because a lot of times we devote effort to the wrong things in our career. We don't put our attention to the things that really matter. And I think your growth bottleneck is the first thing you want to put your attention to when trying to make decisions and take actions that'll really benefit you. So your growth bottleneck is the one thing that, if accomplished, will be the biggest factor to a successful business over the long run. Essentially, growth bottleneck is what is stopping you from growing. So the key here is thinking about, where do you want to go, right? I'm assuming for most folks, it's going to be making full-time living, right? And being able to sell stories to your fans. That's super broad, but honestly, that does bucket up a lot of what our goals are. We might have specific ways we want to go about it that play to our strengths. As I discussed, using some case studies of authors that a lot of us probably know of, but it's nice to think about it in the light of strategy. But to share some more details, I really think there's three things that actually could be identified as a growth bottleneck. Essentially, your growth bottleneck is one of these three things. Either new readers, and you're lacking new readers. Most of us do lack here. Number two is products or content that builds trust with readers. Essentially, you need something that keeps them in. And if you don't, you just have a bunch of readers who are going to leave. And the third thing is one or multiple things that readers pay you for. You need to have a business model. Most of us are lacking on number one. Many of us, the bottleneck is number two. That's what it was for me eventually. It was number one, then it became number two. For some of us, probably a smaller amount, it's number three. Now, here's my message takeaway on this. It's your growth bottleneck can and will change with time, and it's very healthy for it to. And part of being a great strategic thinker and part of your author strategy when you make big decisions, when you're making your plans, is to first stop and say, what is my growth bottleneck right now? Is it new readers? Is it the fact that I can't retain my readers? I've been in that boat. I've been in both those boats. Or is it that I don't have things that readers will pay for? I have an audience, essentially, an audience that's sticking with me, but I don't have a product yet. That might seem like a silly bottleneck. I think a lot of us in our community tend to not have that issue, but I've seen it before with a lot of different creators. And if you are in that position, that is still a very valid problem to have. So where where are you really here? And here's the key to the growth bottleneck. If you devoted all of your effort into just solving that current bottleneck and forgot about the rest, deliberately knowing that you're going to cause a new bottleneck, how would that affect everything you do, where you spend your time and how you approach your business? Like if your problem was getting new readers, and that is your bottleneck right now, and you put all your time into alleviating it, how would that change your business? And what I'm telling you to do from a strategic lens is be okay and comfortable with the fact that that growth bottleneck is going to shift if you actually devote your effort into solving one. And that is okay because you should always have some sort of growth bottleneck in your business. Like if you don't have a bottleneck, that either means you've settled for not growing more, which is actually okay. That is completely okay. I'll talk in the next slide about why that's okay. Or you've stopped growing, now are shrinking, and are not making progress, right? So there's always going to be something, one key thing that's probably holding you back more than anything else. And again, if you're having trouble figuring that out, always happy to help. Always happy to help chat with y'all. Send an email in, whatever. I'm always happy to help. But my instinct, if I'm being honest with y'all, is that For 90% of you, it's pretty obvious which one of these it is. It's pretty obvious which one of these it is. And I want you to be fearless in devoting all your effort to doing that one thing and to just alleviating that bottleneck. But bottleneck's only one part of the equation because there's something equally as important, which is your moat. And this this is the defense of your business, right? Think about, your author business as if it's a castle, right? This is what keeps competitors from taking your business. It's one thing to grow, 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 grow. But if it all crashes down tomorrow, that isn't very sustainable. Mind you, this business is always up and down, but up, 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 and completely down, starting from zero is not something we want, right? And the way that we make sure our castle still stands, even if it has, cannons shooting at us, or I don't know, I guess zombies could attack a castle. I'm not sure. You get a bunch of different creatures attack a castle, dragons. The big thing I want you to think about is what your moat will be. And your moat is actually what's going to end up defining your business. Your growth bottleneck is going to change, right? How you solve that growth bottleneck is going to change as well. The tactics you use, right? That's okay. That's part of it. There's a lot of different ways that'll happen, but your moat is much harder to change. Literally think about it like a moat in a castle. Once you dig it, what are we going to fill it back in and dig a new one? Like, yeah, you could, but that's really, really, really hard. And when you think about what your moat is as an author, my one big, you know, loud opinion here that you can feel free to disagree with, but it's what I certainly believe strongly, is that your moat is not your content at all. That can't be a moat from a first principles lens, because content in and of itself isn't valuable. That is a very can feel like a very weird thing to say, but I think these times prove it now more than ever. What is valuable is your network. And when I say the word network, what I mean is literally how you interface with what we call culture and you keeping your space in it so that people are unable to interfere with it. You are benefiting from some form of a network effect where there's an audience that benefits from you being there or from your content being there. But it's not the content in of itself that's valuable, it's the network. I'm going to give a few examples because that feels convoluted and I understand that. You can have many different moats in a publishing business, but I think they all fundamentally are network or audience related. They're related to trust and relationships, not to content, right? So one of them is email list size and engagement, right? That is a network. You have a huge access to a big audience of people. But what's key is not just size, it's also engagement too. It's knowing that they're coming back to you recurring, it's knowing that they're still staying engaged with their newsletter. They actually care about what you're saying over a period of time. That is certainly a moat. And if you designed your growth bottleneck and moat in concert, where to solve your growth bottleneck, you also were accomplishing something that was building your moat. That would be very good from a strategic lens. So I am going to get more readers to buy my books and grow my audience through Facebook ads because I'm going to generate leads there to my email list, right? That's a way that works together. Retail space and retail relationships. Okay. Having shelf space is a network effect. It's not your content that's valuable. I know it's tough, but it's the network. It's the fact that you have shelf space and access to distribution that other people don't. So what can you do to get new readers, but also know you have existing readers there? Okay, maybe it's building relationships with retailers. Maybe it's then running promotions with them. And when I say retail space, I literally mean physical retail for the most part, not online, because online is not scarce, so it's not valuable. The retail space inherently online is not valuable unless you're paying for it through Amazon ads. But if you get retail space relationships in an actual physical store, it's harder to break into that. It's a defensive moat. It's a weak moat, online retail, very weak moat. It's a moat, but it's weak. Strong moat is in-person retail. Again, paradoxical. Not many people talk about that. But if we think from first principles, what a moat is, defense to our business, defending our network, defending our distribution, making sure that we have access to something proprietary to reach people that other people don't have. No one can get that access to reaching these people because we have it, right? That's another valuable thing. Social media followers and specific platform is another one. I would maybe view it as a softer moat sometimes, but it can also be really, really strong. Like having a loyal following on a social platform, if they truly are loyal, which loyal doesn't have to do with an algorithm, it has to do with human behavior. It has to do with them liking you or liking your content, wanting to come back to it. That can be very, very valuable. Mr. Beast's moat is his YouTube channel, right? There's no failing list there, really. It's the YouTube channel. So, and it truly is a moat at this stage. So that's something to think about. Another one is relationships with collaborators and reviewers. Like you have 100 different booktubers that like love you and adore you in your genre. Like that's a moat. They're going to talk about your book every time you come out. So build those relationships, right? This is where a lot of companies that are not in the author industry focus on sales, right? And their moat is a sales force that has relationships with all these different companies to be able to sell them and cross-sell them different products. So, these are moats that are tried and true to cross businesses, and you could take the same approach. Another one is defining a new category, such as a new subgenre. Again, we're in an industry of culture. The network that we're trying to actually build distribution is not to eyeballs necessarily. It's not to shelf space necessarily. All these are proxies. They can give us what we want. What we really want to build is a stronghold in culture, right? We want to create something that stays in culture over time, that's passed down through generations, and whether that passing down through generations is us being able to send emails decades from now to the same emails or similar emails, or having the same bookstores have it in retail space, having the same people follow us on social media, or having people talk about us and making it easier for people to talk about us. So, a good example that I've used lately is why dystopian, right? When I say the word young adult dystopian, what book do you normally think about? Probably Hunger Games for a lot of you. If it's not Hunger Games, it's probably going to be something like Divergent, right? It's a handful of books that we know because they define that category and they become easy to talk about and more easy to share. That perpetuates their sales. That's what's called a language network effect. Very powerful. How can you use language as a weapon to be a moat for you? That's another powerful thing. Next one is a CUNY for a specific genre. Um, there's so many different CUNYs that exist out there for different readers, but imagine if you own the space for a genre, that if a reader wanted to go to a Facebook group for X genre or for X type of story, they're actually coming to your space, and your space is the biggest and the best and continues to be a moat because what are you going to just take everyone from your community and bring them somewhere else? That's very hard to do as a competitor. They're probably not going to. So you have that proprietary distribution through community. So that's another way to think about it. Then another one as well is brand and reader trust, which having readers trust you is the ultimate thing. Like if you lose this entirely, if you don't have any valuable brand, if people hate your products, like again, like here, that's terrible. But I think that alone is tough because it's strong, but if you're not coinciding that with some of these like another moat core to it, whether it's the email list or a community, it's going to be tough because it's like, how do you still reach those people? How do you still have distribution to continue selling to them? Where are they coming back to? Like there has to be still something else to it. But this is a reminder that if you have a huge list and engagement, but they still don't trust your stories, that's still not really mode. If you have a community where you've used language and it's being adopted, but you still don't have people trust you, then people are going to say, oh yeah, there's this book that, kind of kickstarted the genre, but don't read that one, read this one, right? So you don't necessarily want that either. And like, as I said, kind of a reminder here, but you can have multiple moats theoretically, but in practice, I think one moat is going to be by far the most strong. And you can look at a lot of different authors and see like what their moat is. Like James Clear in Atomic Habits, that book continues to sell like hotcakes. And there's a simple reason why. His mailing list is 3.5 million readers. The growth tactic he used in early days to grow that was SEO. That's how he alleviated his growth bottleneck to literally millions of readers. Now he sends out an email every week. He just has to add it in the PS. Here's Atomic Habits. Here's Atomic Habits. And it just continues to sell like crazy. So yes, he has his retail space. That's another moat that he has for sure. He has social media followings for sure. He has relationships for sure. But his main moat would be his email list. I think that's by far his most powerful one. And it's really what he built his business on because he both grew and built a moat through the same activity. I think where a lot of us can be in a dangerous game is when we devote all of our effort into alleviating a growth bottleneck, but then aren't building any kind of moat. So that's when we get into this kind of tricky position where it's like, oh, we're dependent on Amazon, we're dependent on this platform because we don't have anything of our own. That's a problem. Okay, so now we're to the third step. Technically step four, but remember, step zero, stay alive. We're to the third step that's really actionable when it comes to strategy, which is identifying what tactics you'll use to eliminate your bottleneck and strengthen your moat. Now we start to have fun, right? So I want you to put both together here. Like I mentioned, how can we take the same tactic, eliminate a bottleneck to grow more, and strengthen our moat to ensure that we continue to have a business in the future? So ideally, the same actions, lead to your moat strengthening, your bottleneck being eliminated. But the thing to remember here is that in strategy, moat, I think is tough to change. You can change it, especially if you're early on. But like if you have a massive, massive mailing list and you go, screw this, I want to go all in on this other moat. I'd ask yourself, is this really the best idea? Or is it better to make your existing moat stronger, right? Because your moat can really define you in a sense. It's like that's how they built that business. You attack the moat, you can attack everything. Um, Likewise, when it comes to your growth bottleneck, this changes naturally with time, but this isn't necessarily something that you get to choose. Like there's going to be a growth bottleneck in your business. However you design your business, it's going to be there, and it's your job to identify it, less so than create it, right? Like the moat you get to somewhat pick, but the growth bottleneck is there. Like you have a business outcome and it's not being achieved because of XYZ reasons, and there's going to be like a Y or a Z that's really strong and causing that. And it's your job to identify that. With all that said, tactics are the most fluid. You can change tactics on a week to week or daily basis. And underneath each tactic are what I call like micro strategies, because you'll have a separate strategy informing each tactic you use to ultimately do two things. You want to eliminate your growth bottleneck and you want to strengthen your moat. That's the only two things you want to do, right? So you're going to have tactics that accomplish that goal, and you're going to have strategy inform those tactics, micro strategy, right? So all that's to say, because we're getting into, I feel like a lot of jargon, is you can deploy multiple tactics at once. You can change your tactics. Your tactics will change with data, with time, and honestly, with changes in the market. But another big thing to know is that your tactics will inform your strategy, and your strategy are going to inform your tactics. Meaning, let's say your strategy is to run a specific content strategy on TikTok. You want to grow your audience, and you specifically want to grow the folks purchasing products on your direct sales site. Your moat's going to be an actual customer list of buyers. Your growth bottleneck is right now that you need more people to see your offer. You need more readers. So with all of that, right, what you might end up finding is that your initial strategy, your micro strategy to do well on TikTok wasn't that effective. That eh, you thought that type of content would work well, but you've looked at retention and it's poor. There's other creators who are performing better in the niche using these different tactics or potentially um, different strategy, different content formats. Then you adapt what you're doing based on that. And now you have new tactics because your strategy has shifted. Um, and those tactics then will inform future strategy based off of that, right? So it's this constant feedback loop. And then these tactics have led to your audience growing, and now your growth bottleneck changes and your whole strategy has to shift as a result, because now you have to focus on retaining customers, and that becomes a bigger issue because you already have a lot of customers, but now you need a product that's better to keep them in, or you need to focus more on building a community with your customers, whatever that is, right? So we get to start to see the interplay here. Now, when it comes to tactics and strategy and all these different areas, I created a free quiz that you can look at now. I haven't launched it to the public yet. I still want to make two changes to it, but you can access it now, and it's called the Author Marketing Styles Quiz. You can find your marketing rhythm, which is like your speed and pace of marketing, your voice, which is like who's doing the telling of the marketing, and then your tools, which is like the platforms and different software, different places that you'll be sharing your story. Effectively, it's how you'll share your story, what the story will be that you're sharing, how you're going to do that, your approach to it, the who is doing the telling, and then the where. So it's the how, the who, and the where. And that's what the author marketing styles quiz is. So you can take that totally for free. Um, and hopefully that helps you start to narrow down on some of these tactics that you can use, some of the overall strategy that you want to take in your author career, your marketing style, which is a more fun way of branding strategy, but it's effectively funneling into the same thing. It's like we're all trying to figure out what to do here, right? And strategy is the more cerebral component, marketing style is the fun, cute. Let's get a starting place that we can then start to dive deeper with these strategy. Hopefully that we're all learning right now. So I'm almost done. I've got like two slides left. So I'm probably going to be right at the hour mark here. And then as a call out, very soon, I'm going to be asking you all to begin thinking through this process, begin sharing with me what your strategy is, right? Share with me what your strategy is, and then let's walk through together what's working with it and what's not. Um, So that's coming up very soon. But now I want to share the last part to strategy, which I already started to highlight. Um, I always jump ahead of my slides in my brain. It's an annoying thing, but essentially everything's funneling back to your overall strategy, right? Your North Star, your secret master plan, the big thing that you are betting on that maybe no one else is or that's unique, right? But each tactic, as we said, is a core strategy to it, right? So there's these all these micro strategies underneath your tactics that funnel back into that core overall big secret master plan you have. So an example of this would be you run Facebook ads to grow your mailing list, right? This is awesome. That's a great tactic. Except how will you run those Facebook ads, right? So you've decided you want to grow your mailing list. We can see how that might alleviate a growth bottleneck. I can see how that could build moat for you. I'm on board. But now we need to reverse engineer your winning strategy. So we have this tactic, we have to reverse engineer it. So what I want you to do to start coming up with your strategy, because I think good strategy, part of how you teach yourself good strategy is taking in good strategy. I want you to study top business owners and creators in your niche and see what they are doing. The great part about almost everything you would do from a distribution lens and everything you would do from a retention lens is that it's all public. Like you can see what other people are doing because you can experience what they've created. Nothing is secret. Nothing is at all. Everything in this industry is public. Yes, there's quite a few things on the financial side and some data aspects that are not as public as we'd like, but there's a lot, right? That's public. So you run Facebook ads to grow your mailing list. Well, you can look at the Facebook ads library and you can see everyone who's running Facebook ads and see what they're doing. And you can then estimate based on people's sales ranking, if they're running it to Amazon, if they're running it to the direct store, it's a little bit tougher. But you can at least start to see roughly what other people's strategies are and start to reverse engineer what might work for you. You can do the same thing on social platforms. You can see what content's performing the best. You can see who's watching it. You can see things in other niches that are working and take and remix those strategies for yourself. What I want you to always do is identify what existing gaps are, right? I wrote a whole essay this week on story gaps. What is not being done? Let's say all these folks are running Facebook ads for cozy mysteries, but they aren't including, you know, any ads that involve, let's say, the marketing voice of from a specific character, or maybe they're not including any personal stories of the author themselves. Maybe they're not including any videos. These will all be things to test to see, is there a gap there that could be filled? Or trying to reverse engineer and see out of the existing things people are doing, what could work best for you and how could you adapt that to you? What are other authors doing, other genres that could work? So you always just want to come up with a thesis and test it. Another thing as well is thinking about velocity, right? It's not just about what you're doing, but it's about the intensity of what you're doing. So another kind of strategy could be like just create as many ads as possible, right? So come up with 100 ad variations and test each 100 images a week. Technically, like mostly with ads, I do see volume being a good thing with ads. Like the more ads you could come up with, the more variations is a good thing. So that's a general strategy that I would give to you. And I'd say, this is where I would go. Reverse engineering, what a lot of different businesses do. Broadly, the strategy should be more is better. Now, backing into what kind of more and what should that more look like is now where we get to even more tactics. Starting to see it all, right? It's fun. It's really fun. So you start to then get like your overarching Facebook strategy, which is one simple sentence, create a lot of ads. And then it's like, okay, great. Got my Facebook ad strategy. I'm going to make a lot more ads than any of my competitors. I'm just going to come up with a ton of them. So then it's like, okay, great. How do I make good ads? And then that's the constant iterative process where your tactics and strategy continually evolve. And then maybe you end up finding 100 ads a week is not needed. We're going to do 10 a week, whatever. But this is again how I'd approach it. And then Facebook ads is just one thing. We could talk about newsletters, we could talk about TikTok, talk all about that. But this is how I think about it. So we're getting close to my hour mark, and I'm gonna try and keep my promise. And I have 2 slides left, counting this one. So I, not that I have like enough on my plate already. I writing writing readers first is something I'm beginning now. It's gonna take me a little bit to finish, but it's something I'm really focused on in May. When you're watching this, depending on if you're watching it when it's not being recorded, like in the future, if you're watching this, this book likely is already out. Everyone here who's like listening to this call, the only way you're going to be listening to this call is if you are getting readers first for free. So if you're an author Sidekick Plus member, you're getting it for free. At least the ebook and audiobook copy. If you are however else you would ever get this, you will have gotten this for free. So you should have Readers First either in your hands or it will be in your hands, at least digitally, um, which is exciting. And every time I like do something now, I'm always trying to think about kind of like my own strategy. How can I um, do something that stands out and kind of fills a gap that actually helps folks? And I started thinking about coming up with a strategy game for authors, and it'll be fun to see how different this draft is from when you're seeing it to when it's live. But I'm pretty convinced it's going to look pretty similar to this. And the concept of the game is simple, but what I want to walk you through is these 10 key questions that the game's going to take you through. So the dice are essentially going to have six sides. There's going to be different words on each side that are essentially ideation prompts. They're going to help you figure out, like when I say, who is the audience for your story? This prompt will help you nail down, oh, this is my audience. This is one way to think about my audience. This is another way to think about my audience, right? How readers care about your story more than others. That's the die is going to have six sides to help you ideate on that. Same thing with how will you test if your story idea is something readers want. So there's going to be 10 dice and a board that you'll row them on. And you'll be able to write down your answers in the game book and really help to kind of from ground zero develop a strategy for a story. Now, mind you, these are random dice. So, um, you know, what you end up rolling one game might be very different than another game. And you might be able to see very quickly two different strategies and be able to compare them, mix and match them, and then ultimately deploy the one that you think will work best for you. So that's the whole idea behind the game. I think it'll be fun, always open to feedback. It's beyond early stages, but this is kind of the next thing I want to do in addition to the cards, the author marketing superpowers deck. I don't think I'll have a million things I do like this, but I want to have a few core things. I think this is certainly one of the core things. I don't necessarily have even anything on my roadmap beyond this, if I'm being honest with you, but I'm really passionate about this. I think it'll be fun. So the 10 questions in order are who is the audience for your story? You have to think about the synergy map. I'm going to be coming out with an Authoropolis map soon, and I want you to think about that first. Next is why will readers care about your story more than others? Story gap essay is a great primer on that. That's a very important question. Next is then how will you test if your story idea is something readers want? I'll be diving deep into this in Readers First, but essentially, I use something like wish orders, wait lists, or actual pre-orders. Essentially, how are you going to validate that readers actually want this, right? And thinking about it strategically, you're best to follow these questions and answer them in order rather than doing any work to answer a later question because you will be able to iterate faster and achieve a better outcome faster rather than wasting time trying to do future steps earlier because you're just going to be wasting time. You're not, if you're trying to alleviate a bottleneck that doesn't exist yet, then you're going to be wasting time. That's literally why like the book is called Readers First. It's radical, but sell your story, then write it. Now, what packaging will sell your story best, right? Unique cover or format? Is it like not even going to be a regular ebook? It's going to be something else. Then how will you share your story with your first readers? This is one-time marketing events, and each side of the die is going to name the six types of one-time marketing events. I could do a whole hour workshop on that, and I probably will at some point, but these are just ways to easily get your story out to readers. You don't have to build up a crazy marketing campaign or do some PR blast. You're just trying to get initial traction, initial attention to test if your packaging and story idea resonates with someone. Then the next step is question six. How will you use data and feedback to determine if you are on the right track? So you need to eventually test engagement. How are you going to know your readers not only converting to your story, but liking it enough to continue on, right? So this is a whole other kind of science to Readers First that the book dives even really, really deep into, and we'll give you a few specific tactics you can use for that, and that'll be on the dice. But the point here is you need to be thinking about this yourself because the dice are six dimensions, and I think they'll be very, very helpful starting points. But you can mix and match these and come up with your own ways to do this too. The question is what matters, right? The question is what matters because that's what strategy is about. So how you use data and feedback to determine if you're on the right track. Then the seventh question is, if your sales are not on the right track, what changes will you make to get your book selling? More often than not, question seven is not one that we skip. We have to answer question seven because we end up realizing that things are not the right track. Then eight is how you scale your readership. Reader Growth Engines shares those tactics, but there's, as we said, micro strategies underneath those tactics and lots of different levels to it. So it's not just as simple as run Facebook ads. There's a lot more than that. Or it's not just as simple as create TikToks or do newsletter swaps. It's like, okay, no. There's a lot more to it, but The reader growth engines are all about that. Nine, how you connect and build trust with fans. This is all the reader journeys. This is how you're going to take someone from stranger to super fan, in the words of David Gaughran. How are you going to take someone who doesn't know about your books and what content they're going to see, in what order, what are you going to hit them with, what messaging to build trust? 10, what can you create beyond your stories to expand your audience and income? I'll be honest with you, this is not necessary to build a great business, but this is what you are definitely going to want to do if you want to build a legendary business and actually build an empire, as I say, with Beyond the Book. And I think it's really important when we think on a 10-year time basis and our moat and continuing to diversify our business. That's a very important question. So, author strategy dice, the strategy game for authors. Giving you a little preview. Potentially, if you're watching this in the future, this isn't a preview. This game is out and you can play it. But now you get to see how this game plays into the bigger picture of strategy and how you can use these questions right now, because you don't need any dice to ask yourself these questions. You can use these questions to improve your author business today. Last is steal your strategy and why data is your best friend. So my hot take is you should be obsessing over signals from your own actions and those of others to understand what tactics are working best right now. Out of your content, what is getting the most views and why? You always want to understand where people are dropping off in their reader journey with you, right? Your read through rate and retention. You need to know this. You need to know what is your outlier content, what stories are performing better than others, what marketing is performing better than others, what ads are performing better than others. You always need to know that. And you also want to understand what those are for other creators. You can't map that on perfectly, but you can know if it's on social media, what's doing better or not. You can start to understand if an ad showing up in your feed all the time, that's a winning ad, if it has more engagement. You can start to understand because more money is going behind it, right? You can start to understand that a book's doing better if it's selling more and it has a higher sales ranking. You want to use all of this data, all of this feedback to iterate your strategy faster and better than others. So essentially steal, quote unquote, your strategy. You're not actually stealing it, and you want to use data and really what's working for others to inform what's going to work for you. But you don't want to let data be your king. This is something I've seen in my own strategy work professionally for creators and personally. There's so much data left out of these platforms and technology systems. You can't just rely on engagement data. It's actually dystopian if you only rely on engagement data, because then you create some sort of like hedonistic pleasure machine. There's all these like philosophical things, but regardless, not that that's a terrible thing. You can maybe think it's a good thing. But if you only optimize for engagement, we almost take out you as the artist in it. So you have to trust your instincts. You have to talk to real fans, and you want to get an intuitive sense of what your readers and potential readers care about, right? Think communities, live streams, cons, and signings, all that good stuff. So let let your own instincts guide this. You should not be just using data. You should be coloring it a lot by asking yourself, why is this that way? And what can I do better? Because that's ultimately the real core strategy question is why is that working and what can I do better? Is the core reason you figure out all your different micro strategies, all the reasons you figure out how to innovate and do better, is that you ask yourself that question, like, how can I put my readers first? How can I do better for my readers? That's the ultimate mega strategy question that all these other questions that do our planning and help us decide where to go, all that's great. But it all ends with how do we put our readers first? And mind you, it starts with that too, because the first question we all have to confront is how we grow our readership. So with that said, um, thank you for this. I want to share the three takeaways again before I just end, and then we'll open up into helping you all through your own strategy. So be prepared. I'm in a literally minute going to ask you what your author strategy is and help you through it. We'll have about 20 minutes to do that. But before I get there, I want to sum up some of the key takeaways. First one that I didn't even put on this list, but it's so crucial, is your strategy must be sustainable. If your strategy is not sustainable, it's not a good strategy because this is a long game. Next is that your high level strategy has three components, right? Your growth bottleneck, your moat, and then the tactics you will use to build your moat and eliminate your bottleneck. So each set of tactics has an accompanying micro strategy, right? So tactics and strategy are intertwined. Author marketing styles helps you determine the best tactics and strategy for you. And you can ask yourself the author strategy dice questions to make a micro strategy for your story. And lastly, right, I want you to use it as a guide to help you iterate, but not your boss. You're the boss. You are an indie author, not a data-led author. You're an indie author. So data won't tell you what to do, but it does share a really important perspective, but doesn't trump your own. You should be using both in conversation to do better by your readers and always put them first. Okay. That was the author strategy masterclass. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to open it up to all of you here and actually catch up in your comments because I just was like super focused on delivering that workshop. But I will pin myself and then let me read through these comments and I'll give you all a little bit of time to think through your author strategy and we'll dive into it. So seeing all these home now. Okay, everyone's sharing this. Sorry, being late. Okay, y'all were sharing. They love his series. Uh, okay. Great. Awesome. Beautiful. Uh, what's up, everyone? Um, who wants to share their author strategy and what they're struggling with now, what they're going through, what's working, maybe what's not? We can all talk about it.
I can go first. So I'll jump in because you and I have been working together on some things. And so you can see if I've got this down to the right direction, at least to get started.
Yeah.
Um, my big strategy is to build my super fans into um, readers that will buy things beyond what I write in stories. So it's really bringing them to a next level of fandom. That's my strategy to do. My moat really is that I have some really loyal fans. I have a brand and I have people that follow me there, um, and I think that's important. Um, and so I'm really leaning heavily into um, taking them on a journey with me, specifically to write next couple of books, and lean into the fan aspect of creation, which is something new and a little scary for me, but it's uh, it's necessary to take things to where I want to go next. I mean, I I've been writing since for a long time, but since professionally since 2014. So I've seen some ups and downs in this business. I've ridden some highs and slumped through some lows, and that's one of the things I think your interview with Kevin J. Anderson really nailed was him talking about the peaks and valleys of the publishing business over his 40-year career. Is an important thing to remember that what's a good strategy today may not work so well 10 years from now. But that's okay because if you're flexible and you didn't see the changes coming, you readjust and find the next winning strategy.
I'm so with you, Jamie. And I love you sharing like in all that detail, like how you're thinking about it. And I know this is silly, but I'm gonna ask you the like a foundational question because I think how I always like to approach strategy is like a lot of the real like alpha or like the real good work is done at like the very rudimentary level because when it comes to like any particular tactic, that's a fun process and we can dive deep into okay, Jamie, here's all the different ways you can do really well for your fans and dive into that strategy. But I want to ask you, why is building this community and really treating your super fans well and going on in that, why is that your winning strategy right now?
Sorry, can you ask the question again, Michael? I was reading Erica's nice comment to me about my books in the sidebar.
Oh, well, that's very sweet. Erica is now reading Jamie's book and is loving it. One of Jamie's books, Extreme Medical Services, which is amazing. That's great to hear. Now, my question is, you were talking about, you know, your strategy for really building super fans, right? And going all in and building that community and taking your fans along for the adventure. That's your core strategy right now. And I love that. My question to you is, why do you think that's your winning strategy right now?
I really believe that it's where I need to go next. Because as we talked in the beginning about, AI can help people create stories faster, and you know, people are worried about the market flooding with stories and things like that. Where I believe that the real benefit for authors will come is doubling down on their humanity and their connection and their relationships with their fans and their readers. And I've done that over the last 11 years, really thinking on a one fan at a time mentality. I take time to engage with everybody who reaches out to me, whether it's by email or on Facebook or in person at events. And that's really one of my superpowers is I'm a very extroverted author. So I don't struggle with talking to people. I'm happy to talk to people. I get energy from talking to people. So um, I really believe that taking my fans to the next level with me on a journey where we go through this path together is really just something that leans into something I'm really good at, which is leadership and building community and friendships and relationship building.
I love it. I love it. So it sounds like to me, you view the you view this opportunity, this strategy as a way to build a deeper moat for yourself to defend in these uncertain times, specifically by ultimately you're going to be building more trust in you, the creator, the author, Jamie Davis. But what you're also doing through that is you're going to be using community to create community between your fans, relationships specifically with your fans, and doing the small things that don't scale that other folks aren't, which I love that. Um, Now, if you had to think about your growth bottleneck, do you have a sense of where that is right now? And do you think that this strategy of really going deep with your fans also could service that as well?
I think so. I really see the bottleneck for this plan, for this strategy, is really leans into continuing to bring new fans into the ecosystem, while I am focused a lot of my energy on my existing fans, and ultimately finding the ones that are willing to take the next step in the journey. Because I have a core group of people that, if I click send on an email, they'll buy a book. But that's not a relationship. That's just an email. And so I want to build more than that. I want to build, I'm very inspired by things that Christopher Hopper is doing with building community and rabid fans. And I have rabid fans, but I'd like to see if there's more out there in my existing group and in the new fans that are coming in, and say, who's ready for the next step? Who's ready to step up and do something really fun?
Yeah. Yeah, it reminds me a lot of like the key thing that you're going to be honing in on is parasocial relationships, which for those who like aren't familiar with the term, it's essentially a one-way relationship. That's how psychologists describe it, where you have it was born out of TV where people were connecting with characters on TV, feeling like they were friends with them. And meanwhile, the TV character didn't know they existed. Obviously, like the actor hasn't met the person watching the screen. So very interesting concept. Um, I think for you, leaning into ways you can interact with fans, allow them to build a deep parasocial relationship with you on their own terms, that being really key is going to be important. And right now, there's two content formats driving, like I'd say the highest um, rate of like parasocial relationships with individual creators. Mind you, for a lot of folks listening to this, you might not want to be the center of the brand like Jamie is. You might want it to be, a different author mask that you're wearing. So the quiz at superhero.authorsidekick.com will kind of maybe give you some instincts on like what is best for you. But since you are the brand in this world and you are the center of it. I recommend, I know you're already doing live streams, and I think that's like a good thing to keep doing. But the issue with live streams is the most live streamed, like popular people in live streaming in the world will have like 30,000 concurrent viewers at one time. You get some people who've been able to break various records, but like if you go on right now into Twitch, like that is like usually like the highest number. Sometimes you get up to 50,000 for sure, depending on the hour of day. That's a lot of people. That's also the biggest in the world. The biggest podcast in the world will regularly get 100 times more people listening to each episode on average. So podcasts are a really good medium as well for um, parasocial relationships. It's the second best behind live streaming. Live streaming is the best. So I'd also really recommend like thinking through podcasts. I know you've been thinking through that as well. Um, but knowing that the real goal is actually like fandom in a particular way, which it's fandom through it's you know relationships that are on a spectrum between friendship and parasocial relationship, and a lot of them are probably going to lean more towards the parasocial end just by nature. So leaning into that in that medium of podcasting, I think will actually be the real way you're going to build a really interesting community and really interesting relationships um, with your fans. Um, yeah, that's my instinct in terms of tactics for that specific strategy. And I do think you can grow. I think you can grow your fan base using this if the continued goal is building Jamie as the brand who through his experiences serves his audience, and then he happens to write stories, and that happens to be like the thing you want. Like if your stories become the merch and you become the person that people follow, I can see it doing quite well in accomplishing both goals, not only keeping your existing fans following you, but and with you, a huge moat, but bringing new people in. And I think, again, thinking about formats that are easier to discover on like live streaming has very little discovery embedded into it. Podcasts also candidly do as well. It's very hard to discover a podcast, but podcasts are in the RSS feed and is kind of a direct relationship with an audience. It's a protocol network very similar to email, which makes podcasts really special. With that said, what I'd be thinking about, and this is kind of my takeaway for you, my last tactic on this, is I would then think about, okay, we've got this goal of parasocial relationships. We're going to use these two tactics of like, live streaming and podcast. Then the micro strategy underneath it has to be, we know that these tactics don't lead to organic growth very often. That stinks. So how can we drive organic growth? It's going to be clipping up the podcast, clipping up the live stream into ultimately like short form videos that will do well. So I would then think about how do I design a show or a podcast that's clippable? What moments can I basically be recording live that I know are going to be good for TikTok? Like literally thinking about it that way. If you want to then really go all in on that, we can talk more about UGC clipping. That's a whole thing where you don't even have to do it. You can pay people very little relative to the value you're getting in return to do this type of thing for you. And there's clipping farms and all these things that exist. We could talk about it more later, not for this call, because it's just too much to dive into. It's a whole world that's really interesting and exciting. But the second thing I think about is if, okay, well, that's not your approach. You have to think about another growth engine for these content and relationship vehicles with your readers, which would then be collaborating with other people. So then I'd be thinking about how can I bring other people onto live streams with me that have an audience as well? How can I bring other people onto the podcast that have an audience as well and promote it that way? And that's also completely valid. You could do both. I always recommend keeping focus small and on one, but you have to basically do one of those two things to get these relationship driven mediums to actually lead to growth for you. Otherwise, you're going to build a great moat, but you're not going to be growing yourself the strategy, which is fine. But I think a winning strategy accomplishes both.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. Who else wants to come up and share their strategy?
Hey, Michael, can I ask a question that's adjacent to Jamie?
Yeah, of course.
It's so Jamie's 10 years plus down the road, and here I am just getting on the freeway, and I have a similar I'm thinking similarly to him as building that fan base. As I start finding people, starting to mark people who respond to my emails, people who keep showing up. So I'm just back behind him a couple hundred miles on the road. Um, how does what you've told him shift for like me? Or is it the same thing, just back further? Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, no, it's different because part of like I know you quite well, I know Jamie quite well. Part of my advice to him was based on, his strengths and what he's good at. He also has specifically a background in podcasting. So when I say
Okay.
that to Jamie, it's like, yeah, like my advice happens to be true, but it's also a tactic that I think aligns well with him. Not that he has to take that advice, but it was specific to him. So thinking about you, um, look, I think you have this incredible core mission behind what you're doing, which is really clear to me. That's you,
Mm.
Jocelyn, and same thing with you, Jamie. Whenever I'm not when I'm complimenting her, definitely not taking away from everything you're doing. You're a rock star. Um, I think that the three core things that make people feel a part of something, that turn a story into a movement, is giving them these three feelings or these three opportunities, which is the ability to gain status, feel belonging, and have an identity in what you're doing. So you need to actually map those out, if you haven't already, and literally map out what that is. Like essentially, like these are the ways people can gain status and why that matters to them. This is how I'm going to make someone feel belong and why they're not getting that type of belonging in their life because the average person is involved in like 10 different communities and has, that Dunbar's number, right? 150 friends and all these things. Like, where am I going to be in that circle? Are these the close friends? Are these like the family? Where are you on that ring? Because like you have to literally think about like this the primordial, you know, facets of our brain, right? And trying to think about that. And then likewise with identity, um, how are you going to have readers show their identity? Because like identity is something that is shown or displayed. It can be only virtually. That's perfectly fine. Think about like, Minecraft skins or things in Fortnite or Roblox skins, right? That's identity. But you need to think about that. And you also need to think about why does identity matter to them? Like what does that say about them? Like being a part of that group says what about this person? So because status is within the group typically. Identity is out group. You want to signal to others. And then belonging is like staying there. I mean, that is like how you turn a story into a movement because then people want to be a part of that. So I think you have to start first developing clarity around that. Once you get that, then we can start to back into, well, what's the best ways to, for lack of better words, weaponize that, but in a positive way, right? How are we able to take this and display this to people? How are we able to take this and bring more people along the journey that goes to your strengths? I don't have, I think it's hard for me to come up with those answers until you do that reflection. But if you come out that reflection, I'd love to like we can sit down and think about that because that's it. Once you nail that, you're solving the some of the core human needs that we have and that are sorely lacking in almost everyone in some way or another.
Okay, perfect. I think I can answer those, but that's for later.
Yeah, that's it. That's what you
Yeah,
do.
yeah.
And Jocelyn, reach out because I'm more than happy to, share any of the bumps in the road I've stumbled over along the way. So please take
Fabulous.
advantage of that.
Yeah, I'd love to have that conversation with you. Thank you.
You guys are both rock stars. You guys will definitely get along. Shannon, what's up?
Yeah. Hi. So, as you were talking about all this, and I was writing notes, and I wrote down some things myself, and I asked myself, "Am I sabotaging myself right now?" Um,
Ooh,
so I started off in epic fantasy, but writing Irish mythologies. I don't. We've talked about this before, but I don't know if you quite
yeah.
remember it. But not really a niche really there because you don't have Irish mythology as a genre on Amazon. Um, and so, but I did a really great job of building my audience. So I didn't have trouble with finding new readers, but it was having the products to keep them because that wasn't really what they were looking for. And
Hmm.
so that's when I realized, okay, I need to change. and and now I'm writing fantasy romance. And I am not doing hardly any of those things. I'm doing some different things, but I'm not doing any of those things to build my audience as I did before, as fast as I did. I'm still building my audience, but I did a lot of promotions. I did a lot of ways to build my newsletter list, found tons of readers. This time I'm not doing it. And I feel like, well, am I sabotaging myself? Because a part of me is feeling like, well, I want to make sure I have a good product, like several products in place, and then go from this to that to this to that. That's not just one book. That they have multiple things that they can buy, which that hits on the number 3. So I'm like already thinking about, I want to have number 3 before I start on number 1. And so I don't know if I'm like sabotaging myself here by not doing these things in between.
Well, first of all, you're definitely not, sabotage is the wrong word because it's too extreme, but I get the feeling.
Okay.
And I think you're doing something that's very natural, which is that, you know, the bottleneck is usually uncomfortable, and it's usually something we try and avoid. The bottleneck comes from a very specific book. My concept of this. And I'll describe the lore now. So, there's this book called The Goal. Um, Let me find the link to it. It's a very interesting book. It's a business fable. So it's actually structured like a fiction novel, kind of. It's one of the worst fiction novels you'll ever read from like a storytelling perspective. So don't judge it based on that. But it's unique that he tried to do something interesting in nonfiction. I appreciated that. But it's a nonfiction in the sense of it's going to impart with you knowledge. And what's funny is that the story element to it actually, even though it's not a great story, does it's very impactful in terms of how you learn. And essentially, the whole story is about this manufacturing plant and this manager in the manufacturing plant who's going to lose his job, and the whole manufacturing plant's going to get shut down because they're not meeting their profit quota for each quarter. And it's a very big thing for him, and he's, working all the time. His marriage is in shambles. Um, it's relatable in a sense, and it's tough, right? He's in this tough position. He's trying to figure out, they're doing everything they can to make this factory produce more and be more profitable, and they can't seem to do it. And they bring in this consultant, which is one of his professors, which ends up, being the guy imparting a lot of the knowledge. He's the guide in this sort of hero's journey. And he ends up basically bringing them through this entire process where they just talk about bottlenecks. And first of all, they weren't even looking for bottlenecks in their business. They didn't even think about that. So they were never thinking about, what is the one thing I need to really do to grow? In their case, it was, what's the one thing I need to do to really produce things that customers care about, which is like the key words there. They ended up figuring out that like they had one step in their entire process that was like pulling up like excess inventory beforehand, but it was a slow step in the process. So it was always backed up, and they were always behind in orders because of it. And all they need to do is like reroute things and change the order flow, right? And they were able to like 3x their output just by making one change, not by adding more employees, not by doing more overtime, but by making one change. So it's about looking at your business system like as a system, and your business system is you. So looking at your time and where you're devoting it to, and where your own blockages are. I read this book because it was the single and only book that Jimmy Donaldson has ever recommended anyone to read, at least as far as I know. So that's why I read it, and it's very good. And I think my advice to you on it is that bottlenecks are hard to find, and we like to avoid them. It's human nature to avoid them, to try and figure out, let's do more of this thing or more of that thing, when it's like, it seems simple, right? So sometimes if you're in the position where you're going, I want to write more books or do more of this or do more of that, you kind of have this pipeline that feels comfortable. You have this process that feels comfortable. You have to go and look to the part that makes you feel uncomfortable. You have to look at the thing that's really blocking you and where you're spending your time, where it's not leading to the output you want, which the output you want is not more stories, it's more readers and more money. And maybe you'll find after that reflection that actually stage, that third thing we were talking about in terms of building out more products and ways to pay isn't really it right now. You do want to focus more on marketing. But with that said, here's another key thing. In intensity, is multidimensional, and you can do something intensely and devote a lot of your time to it. But that doesn't mean you have to devote all your time to it or it has to move forward super fast. It just means instead of allocating whatever you're doing, 80% of your time towards things that aren't this, you're putting 80% of your time into this bottleneck. But that's of your time. You shouldn't be taking from time you don't have. You shouldn't be trying to rush things along at all. I know you've been in this game for a while, and I want you to keep being in this in a way that's sustainable for you. And I think that if you rush it, if you try and even get back to, where you were and what was happening, that thinking, although very normal, can be dangerous because it can also lead to burnout. So you should give yourself permission to be like, I'm taking this bet over a long time to fix my bottleneck flywheel. And it's not going to happen overnight. Unlike this guy in this story, if you read it, which I'm soft recommending the book. I don't know what that means, but there's some books I'm like, you have to read this book. I'm like, it's good. You should read it. It's interesting, but there's a lot of stuff you have to go through to get to the meat, right? So I tried to give you the meat right now. But he had to do it in a month because of corporate and because he was gonna lose his job and lose potentially his family at that point if he didn't figure this out really fast. If that is your position and you're trying to figure out anything that relates to being an author, bad idea because we're in a non-normal distribution industry and you're basically like betting on magic at that point if you have like a strict timeline like that. And then we have to like think more foundationally, like how can we really rework things at a life level to be more sustainable for you to keep doing this. But assuming that you're at like default alive, which is how we should all approach our author career, then there shouldn't be an unbelievable rush, right? And you should be able to take this at a pace that makes sense for you, that doesn't stress you out. But you do want to make momentum happen fast. And momentum's only going to happen when you knock your bottleneck flywheel out. Because otherwise, you might be doing a lot of stuff, but you're not going to be moving forward because taking the factory analogy, just a bunch of people doing a lot of different things while this one machine that actually makes the product is held up. And the tough part in this case is that you're not a factory, you're an artist. And your business doesn't pretend on producing widgets. It depends on building trust with a wide audience of readers. Therefore, the system that you have is not going to be based on output of books because books don't equal dollars for you like a manufacturing plant that has maybe like unlimited demand or like so much demand for their product, right? Like there's always gonna be more toilet paper, right? Like let's get those to the shelves. Your bottleneck, and that's speaking to 90% of the people listening, maybe more, is almost always your distribution. Almost always, not your production. And if it becomes your production, it'll be like incredibly obvious. Like you'll be like, oh my God, like I'm I don't have enough books or this book isn't good enough. And then it's like, cool. Like that's actually an amazing problem to have because now your bottleneck flywheel changed and we can now go solve that one. Um, but yeah, my guess is that, you know, it's easy to start putting time into one thing and thinking it's going to solve another thing. That rarely happens. Sometimes we just try and tell ourselves that because it feels good to do something else that we like. The thing that we need to do doesn't feel as good because it's hard, but that's the thing you probably need to do.
What if you find out all your books are being pirated on another site? Because I just found that out a couple weeks ago and they're not taking it down.
First of all, that stinks. I'm sorry. That's pirating's it's a backhanded compliment because I know a lot of people say like, "Oh yeah, like someone cared enough to pirate it," but it's the worst. But what I'd say to that is this, you know, it's almost like the haters conversation, which is like you shouldn't focus on your haters because like not your fans. Kind of likewise, your pirates aren't your paying customers. And that's just that's just that. I mean, it's hard, but you have to focus on what you can control. And I know plenty of people who are always going to pirate books because I've talked to people in other countries and they have, and it's not always other countries either. It's everywhere. But whatever their philosophy is for pirating, It's not personal to you, and it's not going to change by any action you take. And they were never going to buy your book to begin with, 90+% of the time. That's my advice. Just to it sucks, and you should be frustrated about it. But it's kind of one of those things. If you've read the Mel Robbins book, Let Them. If not, it's like the hottest book right now, it feels like. And Mel's great. She's got an awesome podcast. But the core thesis of the book is like people do fricked up stuff. They'll try and hurt you, they'll try and take from you. And you know what? Sometimes instead of just, getting caught up in it, the boss that's abusive, because that's way too common, and especially in America, to have terrible bosses, right? The Whatever the situation is that you're in, sometimes you just have to take a step back and let them go on and be dickheads, and you go on and do the thing that you are meant to do and put all your energy into doing something amazing. And this is one of those situations. Pirating is one of those things you just gotta kind of let them. Mind you, you should write to the platform as you have, and you've already done the right thing, you know. But beyond that, let them. They're not your readers anyways.
Thank you.
And honestly, too, the most underrated thing in all this is from a strategy lens is like if we're thinking about like step zero, which is the most important, which is your time, energy, and money and your relationships. I think you should think long and hard about how you can feed your energy and make yourself feel good. Like how can we help Shannon win small wins so that you feel really good and can keep moving forward. And the small win doesn't have to lead into the big win necessarily, because step zero is like keep going. And part of keeping going isn't just, the energy, money, time question. It's like the feeling good, right? It's like you feel like you can keep going. And part of that isn't just a mindset thing, although it is. Like the mindset is co-productive of your reality. So I think you need to make your reality something that becomes easier for you to feel good about. And if that's a small win that makes you go, yes, like I got this. I'm back in my bag. Like that's what I want you to do. That would be my real next step for you, is to do anything that makes you feel like who you are and who I know you to be, because I've known you for, I think, literally years now, definitely well over a year, which is you're awesome and you can do this. And we got to get you back to feeling that. So whatever you can do to feel that, if it's time away, if it's time doing something specific, if it's whatever it is, and if you need time to figure that out too, that's also okay. But that's what I would actually do if I was you. That would be my strategy. My strategy would be first, like, like re get to feeling good. And I actually am confident that position that you're in right now, Shannon, other folks who are on this call right now are in that same position as you too. And it's easy to overthink it. And with all the strategy advice I give you, to start to like be like, what's my big plan and where do I get going? And now I have this and do I do this and do that? And it's like, the real one thing I want you to do is to like feel really good tomorrow. Because if you feel good tomorrow, your strategy is going to be way better. So what can we do to help you do that? That's the real strategy. And you deserve it too. You deserve that.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any last strategy words and things they want to cover on this?
I just wanted to thank Jocelyn for her question because I'm sort of at the beginning of the road as well and invested in sort of the fan strategy. I've studied fandom and published on it academically, and I've been a fan creator and in communities. So I kind of know the dynamics and what folks are looking for. So I know how important that is because I think, back to Jamie, why it's a good strategy is that we all have things we love and we don't always have people around us who share those interests and things with us. And so those connections with people or fostering them with you or with other folks who have similar interests are so important. So um, that's what I'm sort of doing now. I'm creating content because I need content first, but I'm starting to split off part of the time to focus on, social media, maybe group promotions for a novella series I'm in with other authors to kind of bring in extra, I guess, support, when it comes to trying to get the word out and spreading footprints. So I haven't really I've thought about podcasts, and people have been talking a little bit about YouTube. And I'm like, maybe that is a place, like instead of written content, break off a little bit more. If Michael, those are really good spaces for fostering more of that interactive or personal connection with other readers or potential readers.
Yeah, I mean, yes is like my answer to that. Um, I think bookish media, which is like a funny word, but it's like truly a word because it's becoming a thing, is like it's becoming its own like category of media. Like when we think about like social media, like people don't just read books, like reading is a lifestyle. Like reading is a lifestyle product. Like we think about makeup, or we think about clothing, or like we think about travel. Books are a lifestyle category. That's how I actually view reading in and of itself. And that is not just, me pulling that out. It's like you see that in people's behavior and the content they view and where they're viewing it from. And I think it's, the first step we can all take is to be like quote unquote creatures of the platform, meaning, if you're not following people on Book Talk, like get on Book Talk, like get on BookTube or get on the book podcast scene. You don't need to be on every scene everywhere. Um, but there's just so much opportunities because I think that there's actually not enough spaces. Like there's not enough communities online for readers. It's still under indexed in so many respects. Um, and I think that, you know, when you get to be someone who's a leader, not just as an author, but in the community, and get to build your own movement of sorts, that can be a really beautiful thing. But yeah, my first step is like to start to study the creators that are online that you think that are creating bookish content, or might not even be creating directly bookish content, but related to books. That's another thing. Like folks might create content that are at your similar readership demographic, but are not at all about books. That's another interesting space too, because folks may be super into the same things you write about, but just aren't, you know, they're accessing it through, they're not talking about books in this context, but they're talking about movies, they're talking about education or whatever it is. Um, so yeah, there's so much opportunity there because we just under index on that. With that said, I think that the real magic CUNY, as kind of Jamie has been highlighting, like, or definitely gets, and I think you get it too, is like that those magic moments you create for people on an individual level. That will always be the secret sauce, whether it's a magic moment over an email or seeing someone at a conference or a DM or anything. That that's what it all comes down to. And if you're able to turn your magic moments into content, you've got something even better. Like I wrote a custom short story for a reader on her birthday. Here's what it was, and like, there's no money. You gave that to her for free, right? And it was about these characters, maybe in this scenario or in this scene, right? I'm thinking, you know, there could be a specific spicy scene knowing the books you write, and like it's specific for this character, be able to promote that and be like, that was, oh, that was this, that was a gift, that was this. You can turn magical moments into content. That's an incredible way to build fandom. Just to think about like, how can I turn a magical moment into content? Like, ooh, because that's how you can both grow and serve your fans on an individual basis. So, you know, lots of different ways you could theoretically approach it. But if I had to, thinking about strategy and questions, if I had to influence you with a new question, that would be my question for you. How can you create magical moments and turn it into content? That is the that is the core strategy, I think, of how you create super fans at scale. The way that, Beast did that was like giving people money, right? That's a magical moment, winning $1 million or winning any amount of money. A lot of it's, absurd numbers here. But that's it. Whenever I've talked to many Mr. Beast fans, because I would have to for many different contexts, everyone would say, I want to be in the video. Because that was the way the participation that was rewarded, right? So if your business is built on book sales, you want to reverse engineer participation in your stories and reading. So thinking about the magical moment that you want to create should be related to your stories, which is why I immediately went to like, is it a special commission, right? What is that magical moment? Something like that is a decent idea. Taylor Swift is the queen, the literal master of this. No one's ever done it better than her that I've seen. And the magical moment she created was interactions with her fans, right? And Taylor Swift's not in the business of music. She's in the business of bringing people together in huge stadiums. That's what she's in the business of. And she's better at that than anyone in the world. She's also a fantastic musician to boot, but that's what she's good at. So virtually, she was responding to people, literally has responded to over 15,000 comments on Tumblr alone over the years. And she'd respond to comments there when people would engage with her fandom, essentially, when they would post pictures of her merch. This is part of why a critique of Taylor Swift, which is a very interesting critique, is that she's been almost too good at mobilizing people to spend money on her because it's been like you get more access, you get to be part of this community even more the more money you spend. Regardless of how you feel about that, it's genius from a business perspective. So she's nailed that. And she rewards them again for that participation of showing the fandom, showing that you're involved, showing that you're in the community. And the biggest way you can do that is by going to her concerts, right? So she's aligned her content creation, which is engaging with fans online, and her whole business to how she rewards fans, right? Like all of it's aligned. The behavior she wants to see in fans is what she's rewarding, it's what she's creating content around, it's what she's building a relationship on, it's what the business is on. That is like the beautiful flywheel. So that's what you would want to nail in your whole process is that flywheel for you. How does your business, where you're making money, how your fans engage, how you're rewarding that engagement, and how you're creating content to share that with more fans all become one coherent thing. Um, and also that's advice that's like parallel for Jamie too, and also parallel for Jocelyn and everyone here. But that's another thing to really think about. Yeah,
Oh, so much.
of course. Of course. Um, Jamie, no, all good. I probably should jump off too. I have a flight to catch in an hour and a half. So um it's or I'll be leaving in an
You
hour.
what?
Yeah.
You
It's
need to
bad enough
leave.
that it's 2 a.m. for you. Like, what?
Yeah, yeah. I'm going to Crete tomorrow. So or I guess today. It's today now.
Today.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Well, good call, Michael. Thank you.
No,
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
y'all are
Yeah.
awesome. I'll see
Bye.
y'all tomorrow. Oh, not tomorrow. I don't know when I'll see y'all again. I'll see y'all again soon. Please come
Next month.
back. Please come back. Yeah, next
Yeah.
one. In the meantime, don't forget everyone. Together we are boundless. Thank you for coming.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.